Thanks for joining us. It's Morgan Appleby here from Alleviate Risk. I'm very honoured to have the esteemed Dr Gavriel Schneider, who's given up his time during a very busy schedule at the moment to come in and have a chat with us about where we are in this current economic environment and some of the changes that we're going to see going forward. There's a couple of really key points that we wanted to get across, and one of those is that in business we're often faced with challenges in life and challenges in a global sphere, and that a lot of those challenges are outside of our control. But what we wanted to talk about today was to try and help some of you understand what you can control and some of the things that you can implement in your business and your life to help deliver foreseeable outcomes in your businesses. So Gav, very quickly, can you give us a bit of a background on Risk to Solutions, the company, what you guys do generally?
So we're a group of 5 businesses that focus on safety, security, medical and health, and technology. And primarily where one of our fundamental differentiators comes in is that our risk consulting division, as opposed to your risk consulting division, even though we do the same things just from different perspectives, focuses really on humanistic risk, decision making and risk culture. And as you know, being a graduate of our program, for the last 5 years we've been running a postgraduate program in the psychology of risk, which is really an enhanced decision making and performance program.
Yeah, brilliant. And an interesting point that you raised there, one of the things that really struck home for me during the psychology of risk program was how our brain processes decisions and the filters that we pass that through, that really gave me a deeper understanding of why we make the decisions that we make, and when looking externally of our own environment, why other people make the decisions that they make. Previously I'd kind of questioned why they were making the decision. Now that I understand some of that, certainly not a guru in it, but I can now look at that retrospectively and objectively and get a deeper understanding of the concepts that are involved in that decision-making process. So one of the things that I think businesses are struggling with at the moment is this concept of what our reality is. I noticed on the news this morning they talked about the new norm. And there's been a bit of commentary on we're hoping that we don't return to the old norm once all of this is finished. We've had the bushfires, we've had the hailstorms, we've had the floods up north, and now all of a sudden we've all been wiped off the face of the planet, for want of a better term, by this virus. Can you step us through some of the processes that business people are going through from a social psychology perspective?
Sure, Morgan. I think the challenge we've got to concentrate on with this is the term business is really big.
Yeah.
All right. And, I think the impacts of people who have frontline businesses like a small restaurant that's been shut down or a gym that's been shut down is quite different to somebody who runs a bank. So the general term of the way business has been affected is not necessarily an accurate indicator of how we are doing or how somebody's business might be doing. I think it's probably worth, before we climb into the decision-making pieces, just to understand from a macro level where we're at. And you'd be no stranger with the acronym VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We were the first business postgraduate education program to bring that into Australia. And our business has been teaching VUCA readiness for the last 5 or 6 years. And this really started when we came to the realization that the 4th industrial revolution is here, right? Artificial intelligence, robotics and automation, the way we do things is changing forever.
And rapidly.
Well, this is where the COVID situation now comes in. We've been forced to implement change at a rate that is so much faster than we're ready and able to cope with it at every level. So societally and from a business perspective, our governments and our businesses have all been built on industrial age performance modeling. It's a focus on management skills, and it's a focus on organizing scarce resources to achieve a focused outcome.
Yeah.
So in the world we live in now, we have this ambiguity that's floating around. What is a focused outcome?
Yeah.
Is that a cure? Is that quarantine and self-isolation so that we don't infect more? Is that business continuity? Can our businesses still function?
Yeah.
And we could go on and on with the questions. So I think the real reality is it's not just COVID. The new norm is here to stay.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's up to us to build the skill sets in ourselves and in our teammates, our families, so that our businesses and our government structures are actually able to cope with the new norm.
Yeah.
Because the old operating systems don't work. And we're seeing that every day now. Decision making is too slow, so we're having to jump loops to make decisions which have significant impact when those decisions are not well thought out.
Yeah. Which we're seeing a lot of at the moment.
And you know, in defense of our leaders and our decision makers, it's really hard under pressure to make good decisions.
Yeah.
So, you know, making a perfect decision when you have no pressure is hard enough because we can't forecast the future. Trying to do it under extreme pressure with a massive consequence is no easy task.
Yeah.
So I think just making sure that everybody gets that, you know, while, don't get me wrong, we're certainly worried about the health implications. There's no question about that. Equally so, though, we need to be worried about the second, third, fourth, and fifth tier outcomes and impacts. So obviously the second tier impacts the economy, which is being destroyed. But the third tier impacts are things like domestic violence, cybercrime. The fourth tier is probably mental health. And the fifth tier, we probably don't even know yet what the long-term impacts are going to be. So part of the challenge when we look at one-dimensional decision making is that inevitably we break a lot of other things, which we're all experiencing now.
Very much so.
So going back to your original point around why are we making decisions and what should business leaders be thinking about now? I just want to clarify, what is a business leader? You know, like, we're all leaders by definition if somebody follows us. So even if you employ one person, that person is following you. So it's really important now that it doesn't really matter who you are, understanding that your decisions and the way you behave has a critical impact on those who look up to you is probably the most important starting point. But looking at, and it was something we discussed many, many times leading up to this chat we're having now, is this concept of perception and reality. So the big challenge we've got is that for every human, okay, perception is reality. Okay, and what they perceive to be real is what they deem to be their reality. So for you, the sum total of everything you've ever seen, heard, come across, or experienced has driven your decision making and your behavior. It makes you uniquely you. That combination of variables provides a platform for you to view the world. And inevitably, you view the world from your own lens as though you are always right. And so do I, and so does everybody else. If you always view it from the perspective of you being wrong, you can't perform. So you're either in jail or you're stuck with post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety and can't function. So anybody who was functioning pre-COVID, they should be able to function now. It's a paradigm switch that has to shift. Okay, it's the shift from a victim mentality to an empowered mentality, but nobody can do that for you.
And I think that's where everyone's struggling at the moment. There's many businesses that are currently, for want of a better term, in the fetal position. They don't know what they can and can't do. Having said that, though, there's businesses out there that are looking at the restriction of trade in some capacity, and instead of focusing on what the things that they can't do, they're looking for constant opportunities of what they can do. And they're modifying their businesses in an incredible way, and we've seen some of that already. Why aren't we seeing many more businesses do that?
A few things. So I think let's look at Australia now as its own case study. So society in Australia is blessed. Okay, as you know, I grew up in South Africa and I spent my early parts of my career doing close protection in some pretty dodgy places you don't want to go to. I moved my family here because this is a really good place to live. And even now with the COVID response, I don't really care what side of the political fence you sit on. Comparatively, our government is doing quite a good job. And if we were having to field the response in many other countries, we'd be doing it in a way harsher, less robust manner than we're doing it now. The government is offering bailouts. It's offering financial support. We have a medical system that's ramping up to deal with what's going on. And it's important for us not to lose track of how lucky we are to have that. And while it's easy to sit and complain about it, we already are in a more fortunate position than many, many other people globally. So we shouldn't forget that as we go through our own personal hardships because our businesses have been disrupted, and we'll talk more about disruption, the concept about reality and perception is very important. We psychologically talk about the concept of sense making. Right? I absorb everything that happens around me through my senses. I then make sense of it and I attribute meaning to it, which is the next step. So what's happening at the moment, because the vast majority of people who've been in business in Australia have been very lucky.
We've been extremely lucky.
We've had almost 3 decades of continuous economic growth. We've had, even if you weren't employed, in a high-paying position, the bottom level wages are still more than good enough for you to live, eat and be successful.
Yeah.
We've been in a position for so long in Australia that the average person has never had to worry about safety, security or health. While the government is taking care of those problems for us, we've now been hit with a new reality. And the new reality is that no matter how well run, how well structured and how effective a government is, they can't deal with a threat like this.
Yeah.
Much the same as cybersecurity and some of those other things that we know transcend the government's ability to be able to effectively police or manage. So this puts the onus back on the business leader. Okay, and it's important for us to get this idea. We can forget the term business. Let's just talk leader.
Yeah.
If you're the person in your family that your kids look up to, if you're the person in your business or your government department or your club that people are looking up to, there's a lot of pressure on you. And it's a real challenge. We're seeing now at the moment a level of fatigue I didn't think we would see with decision makers.
Without a doubt.
Who, once you hit that point of fatigue, the ability to make smart decisions diminishes and continues to diminish. So what we're seeing right now, and I think we've both seen this in the last few weeks, is that people are in a pause mode almost. They're waiting to see what comes next. If I look at my own businesses, we've had a constant pivot process. Clients of ours are diverse, like WHO is a client of ours. So that part of our business has improved, but other parts of our business have shut down in totality. Not because they shouldn't be working, it's because there's a perception now that uncertainty means we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I would start off by posing a question. If sitting at home and waiting, in other words, being a spectator, is the most effective thing you can do right now, then do it. But if you run a business and you employ people, even if you've been disrupted, okay, we've seen some amazing case studies where restaurants have been shut down. Okay, and the next second they've got a booming delivery business going. As you know, I've been training martial arts for a long time. Our martial arts school shut down, but we're running virtual classes, and I was somebody who was exceptionally dubious about the ability to transmit tactile type of training.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's actually better than nothing.
Yeah, I notice a lot of the gyms are doing it too. Some of them have even actually built apps in a matter of days to be able to facilitate that process, and it's impressive.
And this is the trick, right? There are a lot of success stories that are happening, but right now, and we can dig into the neuroscience to understand it a little bit better. We've got a small part of the brain, as you know, called the reticular activating system, the RAS. The RAS filters everything we come across, taste or experience or see or hear according to two factors. What could hurt me, or what am I interested in? Right now, COVID is dominating all of that.
This is the negative press that we're seeing.
And so if you talk about little things that business leaders can start doing, the very first thing is to start monitoring and concentrating on what are you putting in to your own brain. Okay, which is a really hard thing to do. I've been doing this with some of my management team for the last while, and it was very interesting that our general manager popped up the other day and went, I didn't actually realize till we spoke about it that I'm actually at the point where if it doesn't say COVID or coronavirus or government, I don't want to read it. So that's where most of us are at. So we're wondering why business is paused. It's because our reticular activating system is now focused on what could hurt us, which is absolutely COVID and all the secondary multi-tier effects. And it's what we're interested in because it's affecting all of us.
It's on every news channel, it's on every internet site. We get 15 emails a day of someone else's response to COVID-19.
And for those who are leaving their house, whether to go to work or just go and buy groceries, the world has changed, right? You step outside and you're constantly reminded that, hold on a second, I can't shake your hand, or we've got to sit at a table across from each other, or we might not be meeting social distancing requirements. So there's a few challenges we're going to have to overcome, and I fundamentally believe the world should not return to normal after this. The first is the concept of homeostasis. Right? We as a society in Australia, for the most part, have been at homeostasis, which is a level of equilibrium. For those of you who've started up your own businesses and small businesses, you know how hard it is to be a small business player in Australia. That should slowly change over time because bigger business and government are starting to realize the value of innovation and agility. There were a lot of buzzwords about that before, but there were very few real programs. Even our R&D grants, they only work for technology. okay, or science-related experimentation. They don't work for anything social or human in terms of the way our legislation is drafted. So I think there'll be a lot of good things, and that's but one example that will come later. The challenge we've got now is the way we respond and recover. So if you think about any sort of response, and we'll talk about disruption as the trigger.
Yeah.
So the concept of disruption is neither good nor bad, right? It's just that our normal activities and the way we normally do things has been affected.
Yeah.
Okay, why has it been affected? In this case, it's been affected by something that's totally out of our control. The key piece here is to look at this concept of control. The only variable, and we only have to look at work done by Viktor Frankl or many other leaders who've taught us over time that the first battle to fight is the battle inside your own head. And if you can master what's going on in your own head, your view to everything else changes. This is really hard when we're constantly getting bombarded by mixed messages.
Yeah.
Oh, we're winning. No, we're losing. Oh, you're going to get a bailout. No, you're not going to get a bailout. Oh, you can keep your staff. No, you can't keep your staff. Oh, you can go outside and exercise. No, you can't go outside and exercise. And the list could just go on, right?
Yeah.
Which is the manifestation of managerial-based industrial age decision-making, trying to keep up with this VUCA reality we're in.
Yeah.
So this is going to be the norm, not just for now, probably for the next few years, while society and our leadership structures adjust to being more agile, more dynamic. We're seeing now that, having done business in many other countries over my career, Australia is amazing in so many ways, but it is one of the most bureaucratic and difficult places to be a startup business. And your barriers to entry and your compliance requirements in almost every sector are so overwhelming that most people don't even want to try and start a business, never mind successfully run it. You've lived that reality with your entrepreneurial flair. So the challenge we've got now is this is probably the necessary auto-correction that our society actually needs, because the belief that you can regulate and solve every problem by regulation is just false.
Yeah.
That works very well for industrial age thinking. The more rules I put in, the more I enforce the rules, the more likely I am for my system to work. In the VUCA world, okay, those rules that worked for this don't work for this. So we have to go back to a more empowered, entrepreneurial-based approach. So when you're talking about the businesses that are hurting, I'd urge, first and foremost, the business leaders. So if you're an owner, you're probably in a lot of pain and trying to figure out what's going to go on. Use this as a time to pause and reset. If your business wasn't ready to weather this, ask yourself why.
Yeah.
So that next time, when the next disruption comes, you are in a better position to weather this. If personally people are sitting at home going, I've lost my job, I don't know where the next meal's going to come from, you're probably stressing yourself out for nothing, because you live in a country which will make sure you don't go hungry.
Yeah.
So it's important to not let the fear response and the panic response dominate. And from a business perspective, we've really got three survival responses, right? We fight, flight, or freeze. Those are our inbuilt instinctive responses. Look around. This is what we see going on.
Everyone's freezing. Everyone's
frozen. Okay, or you've had businesses like mine and yours who've tried to fight and pivot and do whatever we can to keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually think we're almost past the panic. We're primarily almost past the panic in that people's levels of fatigue are now at the point where they don't have that much energy to panic with.
Yeah. So is this the stages of a disruption? First stage is panic.
Well, it's not really disruption, right? So disruption itself is when we're faced with something we weren't ready for. So in many cases, it's not dissimilar to the way people deal with grief.
Yeah. Precisely. Yeah.
All right. So first I have to accept the fact that what's happening is happening before I can start to look at how I move forward. And this is part of the challenge for the vast majority of people out there. They've never had to accept a reality other than the one they've seen for the last 3 decades. So we've got all this priming, okay, and all this instinctive, intuitive programming that tells us what's going on now is wrong. Okay, but who says it's wrong? All right, so this is the interesting piece that you were talking about reality versus perception.
Yeah.
It's only wrong based on the rules and paradigms we had put in place over the last 30 years. Pandemics have been happening, for millennia. Yeah, we've seen disruption happen in almost every society in history. We talk about positive disruption, Netflix, Stan, all the online streaming businesses. Wonderful for them what's happening now. They've never been more popular, probably never been in a position where they're making more money. Okay, so, perspective is really important. So for somebody, who owns a streaming business or a food delivery business, this is the best thing that could happen to them. For people who aren't in those specific sectors that are able to benefit directly, it's turned their world upside down. So what are the choices? Let's go back. Fight, flight, or freeze. Well, you're not running anywhere. Okay, you're not allowed to leave your home. Okay, never mind the country. So the flight option is not a viable option. The fight option is also not a viable option, because how do you fight a disease? Well, this is what our health system is busy doing, right? For the average person, our contribution is really the social distancing, the staying at home, those sort of things that stop the spread. The problem is that for most people, we've been given so many mixed messages around, well, am I actually contributing by staying home, or am I just being forced to stay home? And again, it's not our leadership's fault, because they've been playing the cards as they see fit, as they land on their desks, and I would have hated to be in that position where you're going economy versus lives, and you actually have to make that call.
It's a big call.
Yeah. And again, we're blessed in Australia with how well our government is standing by us, and actually not just leaving business and not just leaving individuals and saying deal with it. We're getting support. Yes, where the support is enough is going to be a question, but it's better than a lot of other places. So the question comes back to, what do we do now? If you look at those options, fighting's not an option, flighting's not an option, so everybody's stuck in the freeze. Okay, when we're stuck in the freeze, we see what's happening now, okay, which is no action. Right? People are not spending money on anything other than the bare necessities they deem for survival, like toilet paper and alcohol.
This is the concept of almost survival mode. And I'm seeing a lot of that certainly with my clients as well. Their clients are going into I wouldn't call it a panic mode, but there's an enormous amount of uncertainty, and they're trying to preserve cash flow as much as they can, because they just don't know how long they're going to have to drag it out for.
Smart play, and our businesses are doing the same. But what can we do about it, right? So if we look at that at its most fundamental piece, what we have to do is we have to actually intersect and cut off this adrenal response that's forcing us to freeze. We have to get out of freeze mode, and we have to get back to action mode. Even if it's virtual action, it's still action. And we already know that most of the business we do prior to COVID was not human-centric. Okay, we could do most of the business we do virtually anyway. There was a significant amount of value add because of our social engineering and the fact that we shouldn't forget we are wired to be tribal. We've been taught for thousands and thousands of years that I'm safer when I'm in a herd. Okay, it's wired into us. Okay, so for all of a sudden to be cut off and told you can't be part of a herd, and that's what's doing the right thing, that's what doing the right thing means now, is obviously disruptive. It goes against our instinctive intuitive programming. So how do we break this freeze mindset? First and foremost, when we're in a crisis, the hardest part is to know the end point. And we don't know an end point, which is why it keeps perpetuating. What we need to remind ourselves is it doesn't matter what pandemic we've had in history, it ends. This will end. How quickly it will end will depend on numerous variables which none of us can control. So knowing that it will end, you have to play a smarter game. That smarter game is not staying frozen. That smarter game is figuring out who buys from you, why they buy from you, do they still need your services, will they need your services post-COVID? And if you can't even answer those questions, you're in business trouble, you need to call for help. If you can answer those questions, that's formalizing a strategy for you. What is important, and in studying disruptive strategy, the key success factor is the ability to focus on emergent opportunity, not fixed strategy. So we shouldn't be thinking 3 years down the line now, but we should at the same time as thinking 3 years down the line go, what do I want to do to be here 3 years down the line and be bigger or better? So there's a bunch of things you can do for that. How do we overcome freeze? Okay, we breathe. Okay, breathing is one of the most effective ways to minimize adrenal response. We exercise. For those of us who've been disrupted, who used to like to go to the gym and do these sort of things, exercise is not something that has to be done socially. It's easier when it's social, but this is a chance for everybody to have undivided time to get back in shape. The best way to fight a virus is for people to be healthy. So that's a narrative we're not seeing being put out by most government at the moment. We need to drive that. The second part around breathing and health maintenance and stress maintenance is to recognize that I don't care who you are, there's a slow and subtle erosion of confidence and capability.
Yes, and that's kind of where we're going.
So we have to counter that. How do you counter that? Humans function best when we are creating. Okay, so look at what you can do, not what you can't do. Look at the opportunities that are presenting. And there's a ton of them if you think about it. If you can't find any, tag yourself onto others. Okay, that will. So one of the things our business is looking at quite aggressively now, which we didn't really look at with as much focus before, is partnerships. Yeah. So we're finding partnerships with numerous stakeholders now who we never would have chatted to before, but they're going, hold on, we have clients who would buy what you do. We don't do what you do. We can't develop what you do in time. Can we partner? Yeah. Great. I'm perfectly happy for middlemen to make as much money as they can out of us if it's solving problems. Yeah. So, right there, it's break the freeze through breathing, exercise, positive reinforcement. Assess your problem. Okay, and if you can't assess your problem, get external help. Yeah. I can't underestimate how important that is, and you know that from your social psychology training. Yeah. You don't know how badly impacted you are until somebody who's not impacted the same way you are comes to talk to you or help you.
Exactly.
We have to stop this idea that everyone can do this on their own. You can't. Okay, we know right now this is an issue of shared responsibility. But it's not shared responsibility just around COVID. It's shared responsibility of continuity of our society and the enhancement and adaptation of what we do.
I think that's one of an interesting point to make, this concept of asking for help. I mean, most of the clients that I deal with on a regular basis, being very entrepreneurial, understand the concept of contracting out certain activities where they don't have a skill set for it. But for most businesses, that concept of asking for help or bringing in an expert, the first thing they think of is the financial cost of doing so without really understanding the benefits that can bring to their business.
Really important, Morgan. This is the point. If your doors are closed and you're not making any money and you're holding on to what you've got, all you're doing is negatively sliding backwards. Yeah. If you're investing some of that to figure out what you could do and how you could do that, you're actually potentially setting yourself up a platform to pull yourself out of the position you're in. So this again is one of those conundrums, right? Well, if I spend the money and I'm wrong, okay, then I'll spend my money. But if you keep waiting, you're eroding that money anyway.
Exactly.
Okay, which is arguably more negative, because one thing that is exceptionally difficult for business leaders who are used to getting stuff done to do is to sit, watch and wait. Yeah. I'd say that is the wrong strategy right now. We should be looking at how do we focus on what can we do right now and what can we do in the future. Yeah. And
what do we need to change now to be able to do that?
Absolutely. So as but one example, we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, which you'll make available to your viewers. And we asked the question at the end of the webinar, how many of you have a proper pandemic response plan in place? And we had some pretty heavy hitters on that webinar, and only 50% of the people reckon they had a proper pandemic plan in place. Then we went, how many of you have a robust business continuity plan? And we did have some heavy hitters, so I think the initial figure that first came up was around 80 or 90%. And then I posed the question, no, I'm not saying a plan on paper, a plan that will help your business succeed. And that quickly dropped down to under 50%. Yeah, so it's not about a robust piece of paper with a solid plan. It's about a mindset for trying to position yourself and your colleagues and your business for success in a constantly changing world. So this is the opportunity for us to change the way we work. Is it hard? Yes. Okay, putting ourselves out of homeostasis and getting disrupted is hard. Okay, we're taken out of our comfort zones. Our habitual behavior is broken. There's significant mental, psychological, and even physical challenges that impact us as a result of that sort of destabilization. Yeah. But we're actually, particularly in Australia now, we've got a real opportunity here for a few reasons. One, we're about to go into Easter, which is a forced break for everybody. I'd urge everybody, we've got a mini conference running on Thursday. Come to our mini conference first. It's just 3 hours, but it'll give you a lot more tools. But after that, try and take time to stop, think, breathe and reflect. The challenge should be when you come back from the Easter break, how does your business continue, not the negative spiral of I can't do stuff.
Correct.
And this is the part of, we talk a lot about empowerment, Empowerment starts personally. Give yourself the empowerment capability to be responsible and capable of dealing with what you can deal with. So I don't care what sector you're in or how disrupted you are, there's always something you can do.
Completely agree. It's sometimes hard to get people to see that they do have options on what they can and can't do. So Gav, wrapping up from where we're at, if we could do 2 or 3 points just on over the Easter break for people just to really sit down and have a look at their business and their environment, and have a serious, long, hard think about 3 or 4 questions where the answers can perhaps give them a bit of light on where they can go.
So a few key things. Firstly, break the cycle of adrenal stress. You have to do that first. Okay, so take time with your family. Actually be grateful for the opportunity that you might be forced to be with the people you love.
Funny, I'm having worked from home for the last couple of weeks and getting out and doing some exercise. The amount of people that are out with their families is incredible.
And again, this is the gift side of it, right? We can always look at the negative, and there's plenty of negative to look at, but try and focus on the positive. I would say to people, give yourself the personal challenge of every day looking for the positives. Push yourself to do it. We have to be real. I don't think people are going to disconnect from the news over this period. We keep watching, but I would urge people to take a day or 2 where they force themselves to do a digital disconnect. We're actually stuck in a cycle of addiction at the moment, and when you're addicted to something like your phone and the news and social media and negativity, because negativity is addictive in its own right. Every time we get hit with something negative, we get another adrenal dump, which triggers response, but we're all reaching that adrenal fatigue. So firstly, take that time, value the family, look for stuff that's positive. Secondly, really question your business and look at what is happening and go, can I go virtual? Can I go online? If things were to soften just a little, okay, because in all likelihood we'll have some measure of social distancing for the foreseeable future, but we'll probably see a lightening over the next few months, which might see a return back to a little more normality. Okay, so schools, universities, those sort of things might come back into play. Start getting ready to go, well, if the next phase comes, what can I do? And again, if you get stuck in that point where you go, what can I do? And you can't come up with an answer, try and figure out, what do you have? Do you have loyal clients? Okay, who would buy from you in normally good times? They're not buying from you now. Well done, you've got a commodity. Find some partners like you and I or somebody else who will work with you. If you have already got a loyal base and you've got a different type of service that they might be interested in, go for it. The other piece that I'd urge people to do is take time to build your own skill set while you have the time. There's a lot of free resources we've got out there. Feel free to reach out to us. I'll give you a free book, a free reading list of books that you can read during this period, or webinars you could watch that will slowly start to change your thinking.
Perfect.
And then probably the last takeaway is try and get a performance buddy. What I mean, we probably have to do that virtually now. But much this, any top athletes needs a coach to perform well. Right now, when things are tough, okay, get somebody in your corner that you can talk to that will have your back. And if that's not your spouse, it might be a challenge if you're locked at home with a loved one who's also facing the same stress as you are. Get somebody else. Never before has mentoring and coaching been so necessary.
And I think there's a lot to be said at the moment for the mindset training that you mentioned earlier. I mean, we're stuck in our houses within reason with our wife, whom some people are actually getting to know for the first time in a long time, with kids, and it's stressful. You're trying to work, you're trying to take phone calls, and kids are kids. They're not overly, they're not trying to disrupt you, but they just do. They require parenting, and it's challenging. It's very challenging. So that mental fatigue is very real for most people.
Absolutely, and again, you raised so many important points just in that little comment. Like, we need to be careful about what we show our kids, and what we expose our kids to. They're going to be the next generation. How are they going to talk about how we responded to COVID?
Correct.
What are they going to say? Are they going to be very proud that mommy or daddy was the person who got the last toilet roll, or are they going to go, wow, my mom, my dad, really did well through that period. They were stable. They created an opportunity for me that I would never have had before. So there's that future thinking that helps to make us more. We like to use the word presilience. Compliance is the way our businesses run, tick and flick. Okay, resilience is how do we bounce back to where we were before. Presilience is how do we bounce back better. The other piece also is if you're worrying about the stress and the anxiety, that probably means you're already past the point where the stress and anxiety are having a negative effect on you. Please log on to our online training academy. We've got some really quick, easy courses and short tools you can do that will give you what you need to be able to manage this constant cycle of adrenal release and amygdala hijack to be able to perform better. Without those pieces, you're going to find people will just fall back into a negative spiral. We need to kickstart the economy after Easter.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our mission, right? Because if we don't do that, the recovery will be very, very hard.
And a lot of those online materials that Gav just mentioned, you'll see them down the bottom of the video, and they'll also be on my website and on my LinkedIn page.
Thanks, Morg. So we could talk about this for hours, but that's probably enough info for now.
Thank you, Gav, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in. I know you're flat out at the moment in the current environment, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thanks, Morg, and to all of you, please take care, stay well, stay safe.